recording it so that we are able to share it more widely. Obviously, a great opportunity has occurred today with the opening with lesser restrictions for some of our businesses, which has possibly interrupted a number of our local businesses from logging on today. And while that's a great opportunity, it also, from the conversations I've been having with business owners over the last couple of days, has actually caused a great deal more uncertainty and stress for them, more so than what they were going through before. So I'm going to hand over to Kerrie. I'm not going to do any talking because it's not an area of expertise of mine, but certainly the conversations that I've had with Kerrie are looking at just what are some of the anxious moments for small business owners, particularly relevant, I guess, around having to put off staff or having to see the dream of their business that they've been working on for a number of months or years sort of fall over, and how they are able to deal with some of that. We certainly have seen quite a lot of opportunity for small business owners and people within our community to be supported in their mental health, but nothing that's really been addressing these sorts of questions that business owners have. So Kerrie is going to use her expertise and let us know how things are going, some tools and some resources. If you have a question throughout, there's a question and answer button, also a chat button, so that you can write that up and we will answer those. And then at the end, we might just have a bit of open discussion. I'll stop the recording for that unless people are happy for it to be recorded. So over to you, Kerrie. You can introduce yourself or your organisation and go from there. That'd be great.
Yeah, thanks so much, Fiona. I would like to say hi to everyone, and thank you so much, Fiona and Kerrie, for initially kind of connecting us, and acknowledge all the work that's gone into the webinar series and the feedback that you've been getting, and hope that this might also be a contribution to that very rich series of webinars that have been happening. I do want to check with everyone. Can you see me, or can you just see the webinar at the moment, or my slides? Can someone let me know? You can see both. Excellent. And can you see Fiona as well? Both. Beautiful. So what I'd like to do is, given that we have a smallish number of people, we want to make this an interactive experience as well. And Fiona's really going to be in charge of kind of the interactive experience. So I'm in Dubbo, actually. It's beautiful and sunny here today in Dubbo. I can't see Fiona, okay. I'm in Dubbo. I work for the National Association for Loss and Grief, New South Wales, and we have a number of volunteers who work across the state, who work with people who have experienced all kinds of losses. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about NALAG at the end of this talk, because that is actually something you and your staff can tap into potentially for support. When we started, we were talking about, like, why are we doing this webinar? And I think, it's a tricky thing to talk about, right? Mental health, there's still a lot of stigma. There's still a lot of concern about kind of talking about mental health issues. And I guess for me as a psychologist, I'm as much, if not more, interested in well-being as I am in kind of mental health issues. And I guess that's because most of us, while 1 in 5 of us might experience a serious mental illness, there's many of us who actually experience stress and experience other kind of distress that may not be a mental illness, but actually we could do with some strategies and some support around that. So when we were talking about this webinar, we started to kind of think about, well, why are we doing it? Well, for all of us, but particularly for business owners, we have been through drought, bushfires, floods, and now COVID stuff for the past 12 months. There's kind of a sense of things haven't let up. And that's certainly what we've heard a lot of at NALAG. we do a lot of work with farmers and in drought programs with people, and there's this sense of it hasn't let up. So that's kind of chronic stress we're talking about. And it's that boiling frog kind of experience where you actually, the heat keeps turning up and turning up and turning up. And you don't realize you're in hot water until you're way over your head, until you're burning. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of recognize about the chronic stress experience that many of us have experienced. The other thing about small business owners is that we're in a unique situation in that we're often employing our family, our friends, but also our work happens within the context of our social connections with our mates and with people that we know and people who maybe we have built relationships with over the years because of our business. And so the situation, especially with COVID, one of the things that's been talked about a lot is people are needing to let go of friends and family from their jobs. So there's a stress not only as a business owner, but there's the stress of having to tell people they can no longer do their jobs, and the stress around kind of the ongoing uncertainty. The other thing is information overload, and like, I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that in the comments, but there's so much information about grants, about government schemes, about rules. I mean, today, I'm sure that you're all grappling with all of the rules that are kind of changing and happening today. And we've already talked about loss of staff, but the loss of income, the loss of closing down businesses, these are massive issues that have happened pretty much, as someone said to me recently, not because of any decisions that business owners are making, but because of economic and social things that are happening out of the control of business owners. So that's kind of why that's the reason why we started to look at this webinar. But and I guess I wanted to take a big picture view. This is some stats from yellow.com.au and Are You OK Day, and these are pre-COVID stats. So I think that's kind of actually quite important. And I'd love to hear if anyone wants to comment. 40% of business owners are stressed about work. 72% are not seeking any help when they're stressed, and 32% are stressed about their business finances, and 14% are unsure about where to seek help from. I'd love to know if that's kind of consistent with what you know either about yourself or what you know about your colleagues. Yeah. Okay, so 72% is believable, but also scary. Yeah. Yeah, it's really high, isn't it? Like, 72% of people in a particular industry are not sure about where to go when they're stressed. If we just looked at like young people, or if we looked at kind of older people, and we looked at some of the areas that we often target in terms of mental health or stress support kind of relief, that's a really high stat, and I don't think there's enough awareness about that. And the culture has a suck it up mentality. I'd love it if anyone wants to comment about that. Is that true? Yes? No? Suck it up mentality? What do you think? Very true. Yeah. So I guess, if there is a suck it up mentality, then what does that mean? And what can we do about that? And today isn't about, psychoanalyzing anyone, but it's actually about kind of thinking about how can you self-assess in the same way that you business plan and strategic plan and financial plan for all of the work that you're doing in your businesses. How are you also planning for your planning and self-assessing your levels of stress in this? And yes, also feeling like you don't have time to seek help. I think that's a really good point. And let's talk about that as we go through this. Yeah, cultural. So, that's really juicy. The idea of not seeking help being a cultural mindset. Like, how is it that we're not? How is it that the cultural mindset for small business owners might be different for the cultural mindset of the rest of the community that you as small business owners are a part of? Why is there a different kind of internal set of rules for us as business owners compared to what we might say to our best mate who might be stressed, for example? Yeah. So yes, and that's a great point. So thank you so much for all your comments. The failure in Australia is not perceived well, and I think that issue of failure is absolutely something that we need to address, particularly when our businesses, when many businesses are. Many businesses are trying to change things. They're disrupting their industries. They're making changes in the spaces that they are. We need to support people, whether they succeed or whether they fail. And in the US, less so. Yes, I think there's some crazy stats around, how much investment how much money we want to give people, how much money the Americans give startups, for example, compared to Australians. So there's lots of cultural issues, isn't there? So what we're going to do today is we're going to check in about stress and loss responses, and I'm going to provide some practical information about wellbeing and coping, and we're going to talk a little bit about some support options, and then I'm going to bring in a couple of you, hopefully, to talk a little bit about your experiences. Probably before we go on, I do want to talk a little bit about what is stress, because stress is something that you hear the term stress all the time. We hear it informally, but and I'd be interested to see if anyone else has some definitions or thoughts that have been helpful for them to think about stress. But probably, and I like this little picture because stress is a whole body experience, and it is a physical experience, emotional, the way that we feel things, psychological, the way that we think, and our ability to kind of process our thinking through, our planning, and behavioural, what we do in response to the stress. But behavioural also is very much connected to physiological as well. So fight or flight response, most of us have heard that term, fight or flight, and really what we're talking about with the fight or flight response is the body's ability to respond to stress is inbuilt in us. And that fight or flight response is about responding quickly to danger. And the thing about stress is that your body doesn't know the difference between good stress or negative stress. Our physiological responses to stress, raised heartbeat, sweating hands, racing, shaking, not being able to settle, not being able to kind of think through things. All of those things are happening in our body, whether the stress is good, like I'm getting married, or maybe that's not a stress. Maybe that's not a good one. A good stress, like trying to think of all these things that are good stress, like having like a new baby, but they all have, I think that's the thing, right, about any change or experience in our lives, is that we rarely acknowledge that that experience is brings both positive and negative experiences into our life. But the thing about all of those new experiences is that they do create a holistic response. They they change what's happening in our body emotionally, physically, psychologically, and so on. And it is really important to stop and notice the things that are happening, not only in our minds, not only in our hearts, but in our bodies and in our behaviours. Any questions about that? Did I capture that okay in terms of thinking about stress? Yep. Does anyone want to add anything to that? Is there anything that I feel like you feel like maybe I have missed? I mean, for me, maybe one of the things I've missed there that we kind of don't, it's almost, it's hard to talk about sometimes too, is like spiritual stress as well. It's good to remember it's a whole body experience, yeah. So that fight or flight response is absolutely designed to enable us to be able to take action, and that it can be good and bad. Yeah. So this is a resource from RAMP, and which is the Rural Mental Health Service, and it's one of the best things that I've ever seen in terms of thinking about your own responses and like self-assessing, checking in with yourself about how you are going. And what I'd like to do is just give you a few minutes to look at this. So down the side is a set of different experiences. So asking you about how you're feeling, your stress level, your outlook, how you're working, how you're sleeping, your energy, your activity, and social activities. So these questions are the typical kinds of questions as a psychologist I would be asking a client when I'm assessing their stress and their anxiety and their coping and so on. And what this is designed really to encourage you to kind of think about, where are you along this spectrum from well to unwell? It's a self-assessment tool. It's a way to kind of think, yeah, okay, I'm feeling a bit irritable and impatient, but actually I'm sleeping okay. Is there something else going on for me? And then, all the way through to unwell, where people might be avoiding activities or actually having suicidal or suicidal thoughts, or indeed like panic attacks. So the stress is actually tipping over for them. Just take a minute or two just to kind of look at that. What I would love to do is to ask you, if you're game, to share kind of which column you mostly relate to at the moment, and maybe why. And we'll send this out to you as well. Fiona will send it out to everyone as a resource that people can download as part of the presentation. One and two. So like, are you talking about like green and yellow? Yes, yeah. 1 to 2, there's a drop off from column 1. Okay. Green, yellow. Yep. Okay. And can anyone talk about, when you look at those list of things down the side, are there things that you're more aware of? There's a large step to yellow. Yeah, okay. Are there aspects of stress that, so this kind of breaks it down. And I guess the idea is to kind of think about the different aspects of stress that we just talked about. But are are there particular questions or ideas there that you might relate to that kind of really help you identify your stress? Sleep and motivation. Yep. And that's certainly for me when I notice for myself when my sleep level is changed by worry or stress, then actually my sleep is kind of my sleep is kind of my gateway to understanding the rest of my coping strategies, because if I'm not sleeping well, I'm less energetic and I'm less positive and I'm more cranky, and I can be more up in the blue when I'm not sleeping. I can get angry and frustrated much more easily. All the rows have made sense to me at different times. Yeah. Paul, it'd be great to, Paul and I have had a bit of a chat, and I'd love if we could at this stage to bring Paul in to talk a little bit about some of his reflections in terms of how this may or may not relate to your current experience, but also what's helped as well. Welcome, Paul. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, nice to meet you.
You too.
Could you I think everyone probably knows you, but could you tell us a little bit about who you are and how it is that you've come to this session?
Oh, wow. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Harper, and I'm the general manager and owner of Cedar Bar and Kitchen, which is a restaurant and function space in Bellingen, only half an hour away from Coffs Harbour. I guess the audience is all pretty local anyway, so people will know where that is. Why am I here in this session? Well, I've just sort of vested interest in small business within the area and everything associated with that. And I suppose contextually at this point in time, with everything that's happening globally and but specifically to our industry and small business on the Coffs Coast, I'm happy to be part of anything that will help us all take steps to get through it, or see the positivities that can come out of it, or minimise the stress, I suppose, as well.
Yeah. You made a comment that all the rows in this little self-assessment have made sense to you at different times. Did you want to share a bit more about that with us?
Well, at different times of my, I guess, mental state over the last few years, when I read the rows there, it was immediately made sense to me why they're relevant, because I can read things about outlook or sleep, what your energy level is, and I can identify moments where I've probably ranked pretty low, or towards the blue end of those rows, or from a column perspective. But then some of them now, depending on how our situation is right now with regard to sleep, I'm sleeping pretty well at the moment, from a sense of I'm not working the late hospitality hours that I was.
Yeah.
Obviously I've got racing thoughts, as I'm going to bed, and about what will happen and where things will go, but it doesn't take me long to actually fall asleep. And then, commenting on what you mentioned about getting the right amount of sleep, that has really changed my outlook and, I guess, my patience, and my irritability, I think, has dropped, because I'm actually not sleep deprived at the moment.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So there's been, one of the things, I guess, that is hard to acknowledge almost is there's some positive things that have come with all the lockdown, like sleep, but it it's kind of hard to balance that up with some of the other stresses that are happening because you're sleeping more because your business is not open.
That's right. I mean, and I guess overall overarching sense of frustration and some anxiety about what we'll do and how things will change in our industry. But, you know, there are a number of positives that come out of it as well. And I guess what I'm trying to do is grasp those or identify how I can use those positives longer term, you know, make changes to how we approach these things, even when we do start trading again and we get busy, which will happen.
Yeah. So you've so like just kind of going back to that, some of that stigma around, you know, that statistic, 73% of small business owners not really feeling like they're able to kind of access support and so on. What do you what's your response to that? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about that and how we might bust some of the stigma around getting support and connecting with support.
Yeah. I think small businesses, I've been part of several startups in my life. This is the first one in the hospitality industry, but I always felt like there was a stigma attached to failure in small business in Australia. You know, if you have to turn around and say that you failed in business, you know, there's almost a stigma like you've committed some sort of crime or that you don't have, you know, you're not, like you've maybe, I don't know, like you're missing something or you've done something wrong. And, you know, look in the US, and you mentioned the funding they'll make available to startups. You know, after your third or fourth failure, that's when venture capitalists start actually giving you money because, you know, they see that you've made those mistakes and you've actually got the maturity now to potentially succeed. And I think in Australia, we sort of still treat small business owners who don't succeed pretty badly. And you know, I think that is changing somewhat. But in terms of not wanting to seek out help, I think it's a matter of having to share the dirty laundry. It can at times be pretty embarrassing. If you're having to borrow money or seek finance or you've got tax debts or whatever you can't pay, it's almost like you feel a bit like you're on a slippery slope to, you know, to obscurity. And you know, I've found at times when we've been sort of had our backs to the wall a little bit that asking for help has often, you know, getting it off your chest, even if it's talking to our accountant and you're walking in thinking, I don't know what we're going to do, walking out of that 45-minute session or hour session, you do feel much more positive about the problems.
So there's something about, I think also what you're talking about, I think it's kind of a pragmatic approach to, or a kind of problem solving approach to dealing with issues that come up as well, which I think is, it's kind of really interesting from the point of view of kind of coping. Because when I look at this spectrum, and I guess what I want to encourage people to do is to be able to use something like this to kind of really, truly self-assess where they're at and where their risks might be. But one of the things I'm hearing from you is you're also kind of approaching the problem or approaching any stress with a really pragmatic kind of response to that as well. Kind of like, what can I do next? Plan for this.
I agree. I think my response to stress has always been one of wanting to know more or seeking out information or wanting to know facts, and that might relate to health issues or sick family members or whatnot, and wanting to know as much about the science or the technical aspects of something helps me to understand why something's happening or what is likely to be the course of action. And that's always helped me try to deal with stress and remove some of the emotion from it, just because, you know, everything really is about is about facts and about events. And a lot of these things can be about science, whether that's from an economic standpoint or, you know, as in your field from a psychological perspective. But it really has helped me to understand more. But I guess I think I came from a bit of a cynic back 6 to 8 weeks ago, where I was sort of one of these people say, there's no way the government could shut businesses down en masse. There's no way that they could do that. Like, it'll all be fine. It'll be okay. That's ridiculous. The media are running away with this story. How wrong could I have been at that time? And I think, you know, since that moment, it was like, okay, that's happened. Now, what do I need to do to understand what's actually happening? And, you know, I guess I've been one of these people that's been a bit guilty of reading the medical updates on a daily basis and looking at health.gov and seeing what being said there from, I guess, whatever that's worth. But also then looking at things like, okay, so where does that put me as a business owner? I know I've heard of these things called bankruptcies or insolvencies, and then but through that finding out that Institute of Company Directors are giving amnesty around trading insolvent, and, you know, suppliers can't come at you or make it difficult to come after you and sue you for money unless it's about $20,000 is owed. And, you know, understanding these types of things, going, okay, so we've got time, we've got a bit of room, we've got some space to be able to maneuver and try and work with those people proactively to find solutions about how we go forward. But I guess there was a sense of fear at the start. It's like, oh, that's it. You know, I've been thrown under a bus here. I have to file for bankruptcy potentially. I've got money that I don't necessarily have. So what are we going to do?
Okay. So, I mean, one of the things that I would kind of take from that, and I hope that other people, thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for sharing that. I don't know if anyone has any questions, Christina or Fiona, if you had any questions for Paul, and maybe while you're writing those, one of the sum up things for me that I hear a lot is it's really important to match your kind of personal style with your coping style. So the first step is really being able to kind of understand where you're at, maybe from in the well to unwell spectrum in terms of dealing with stress. Yep, that's important. But having an awareness of kind of how you cope. And when I hear someone like Paul talk, and he's talking about very much, can you kind of, I mean, there's not many people online. It's just kind of you and Christina and Fiona at the moment. But for other people who might be watching this, is to kind of think about your personal, can you hear how Paul has very much matched his coping style with his doing and the coping strategies to go with that? And that's a really important thing to understand, because if you are naturally an emotional coper, someone who tends towards emotions initially in their response, then actually information gathering may not help you. Information gathering may cause more stress and may cause more distress around the way that you self-regulate and are able to kind of feel in control of the situation. Whereas if that emotional coper, for example, is able to kind of think about what are the emotions, how do I ground myself, how do I slow down right now, emotional copers often usually need to settle themselves first and be really connected to how am I feeling stuff, what's my outlook, am I positive, am I overwhelmed, am I feeling hopeless? So anything that has a real kind of feeling element to it becomes really important then. So matching those two things is really important. Christina, did you want to add anything at this stage? It would be really great to have your feedback if you wanted to introduce yourself and say something. There's no pressure, you don't have to, but you're very welcome to.
Nothing to add.
Okay, great. Okay, so Paul, I might let you off the hook then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to add in terms of, thinking about advice and thinking about kind of reaching out for support if people need it?
Yeah, I guess the only thing, I think it's been a bit of a throwaway line. Well, not throwaway, it's been used quite a lot at the moment, is that concept of that we are all in this together. And that's something that I've found quite helpful in terms of understanding how exposed I am or how lonely I am in terms of these emotions, is that there are a large percentage of businesses in our regional area that are having the same issues or going through the same concerns, even across the country. And I know then that makes us almost like a force majeure, really, in terms of how we'll come out of it and the support that will be available to us. And so reminding myself of that has helped.
Yeah, fab. Thank you. We know that social support is probably the most important coping strategy or support strategy when people are experiencing stress, and I think it's really undervalued as a strategy, and just it's undervalued. The time we spend with our mates, the time that you spend together as a business network with our business colleagues, is a really important part of kind of getting through all of this together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, and thanks, Christine. Thanks for being here. Okay, so what I wanted to go on now is to talk about two tricky things, I guess, anger and guilt. And we wanted to talk about anger and guilt because this is a really important part of the stress and loss experience for many people in businesses at the moment. Anger about the changes and not being able to kind of have a sense of control over some of the things that have happened. And certainly Paul has talked to that really beautifully. But guilt, being not being able to, again, the guilt of having to tell people that they no longer have a job, the guilt of not being able to run a business that may be really essential for a community. All of those changes at the moment are really an important part of the stress response. And the tough thing about anger and guilt is that we don't often talk about them. They often come out as symptoms, and they often come out as irritability, or they become part of our overall stress response. And so I guess what I would say to you today is encourage you to really think about anger and guilt as part of a kind of a loss response and as part of a stress response that you might be experiencing, that is actually worth kind of recognizing and acknowledging that those feelings might be there for you. And if so, kind of going back to that little self-assessment tool and kind of just checking in with yourself about how much they may or may not be part of what you're going through at the moment. Did you want to add to that at all, Fiona? Because I know that some of the surveys and feedback that you've been getting from business owners has been really very particular, kind of talking around this issue of anger and guilt.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that we've heard really interestingly is the guilt that people feel, one, about if their business has actually grown over this time, and they feel in a small regional area in particular that that's something that might cause anxiousness for them. And the other thing is the guilt of actually enjoying having time off, spending time with their kids and those sorts of things that may not be the right way to be feeling. So they're two things that have come up.
So that kind of, you could see how that ties in then with the positive stress, that stress is both positive and negative, but it's experienced in the body and the mind and everything in very similar ways. Well, that's really good feedback. And do you have a sense of what people are doing about that at the moment, Fiona?
Not really. I know one business owner I've spoken to has kind of said, I'm enjoying it. So, but his thing was, but I'm probably not meant to say that. So it's kind of like I'm taking the opportunity to enjoy this, but I possibly shouldn't be letting people know that I'm enjoying myself. I should really be anxious or stressed or something. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. So have you had, Fiona, again, I'd love to kind of draw on your experience one more time with one more question about what are your thoughts on that? Like, are you getting a sense of what's helping with some of that, like positive stress almost?
I guess, yeah, and this will be certainly pertinent for people who live in our area. We live in a beautiful area, and lots of what we have here has still remained open. So our beaches have remained open, our walking tracks and all those sorts of things. Obviously, regulated stuff that has to be closed has been, but people are still able to, I guess, enjoy some of the beauty of the atmosphere that we live in. So that's probably been one thing that has helped people. Not too much of lots of our cafes and restaurants have been able to do takeaway and delivery. So there's been some interaction amongst residents and some business owners. So I think, I'm not an expert in the matter at all, but that's the sort of stuff that I feel as a like an organisation in terms of with council. Some of my team and certainly some of the employees of council have felt that guilt because they have work to do, and so that's, I guess, another side to that. So my team has been very interactive with business owners, so sometimes that's an interesting take to have.
Yeah, fab. So I guess keep those things on your radar, I guess, is one of the things I would say as a psychologist to anyone listening to this, is be aware of the positive and the negatives of both anger and guilt. Anger can be really energizing and really help you get things done. Guilt can be related to positive experiences as much as negative, but be aware of it and notice it when it's happening, because it's anger and guilt that's often actually the slippery slope to more difficult and to more of these unwell activities that might actually be pointing to feeling unwell. Okay. So let's get on to that. Let's talk about checking in with yourself. Now, on the larger poster that you will get as part of the handout, the next step is thinking about what can you do. So if you're mostly in the green and you mostly kind of see yourself in the green space, keep it up. Whatever you're doing is helping. The yellow, so a lot of people talked about being kind of nudging between the two, and I think some of the things we've heard today certainly point to this, that try not to be hard on yourself, talk to friends and family and do something you enjoy. And those strategies are really about kind of trying to get out of some of these kind of nervous, worried, low energy kind of coping strategies, and moving into something that is a bit more open and a bit more focused at being able to become energized again. In the blue section, we're really talking about when you might start to think about seeking help. And I think one of the challenges that's already been acknowledged in the chat room today is that it's really hard to make time to go and get help and go and get support. But if you're identifying with the blue end of this spectrum, then this is the time to start to kind of think about maybe going to see your GP and having a chat with them about the level of stress that you're experiencing. To really start to make that a priority, and make it a priority before work starts ramping up again and things start to really change. And already the context of COVID is starting to change. So, the other option is to contact your EAP if you're part of an organisation that has EAP, or to look at your local community health centre. But the GP, at the moment, with many GPs are offering telehealth consultations, so you can try and make the most of that as well and do a consultation online and talk to your GP that way. If you're really identifying in the dark blue part of this spectrum, then we would encourage you to actually reach out to mental health services. That it is really, or if you identify anyone who might be, or you're worried about someone who might be in that dark blue space of well-being, then that really is, some of these signs and symptoms are really a sign that people need extra support, particularly if someone's feeling suicidal, or particularly if someone is starting to feel like they're getting out of control with their behaviour, or panic attacks. And some of the signs that you might see in a friend or a colleague are, you might not hear the suicidal thoughts, you might not hear or see the panic. What you might notice is that person stops turning up. And they start avoiding some of the things that you would ordinarily do together. And that's kind of a strange thing to think about in the time of COVID, where we're not getting together as much, but they might not be available for phone calls or texts or other kind of social media aspects, that social media kind of interactions that they ordinarily would. Any questions about that? The 1-800 line is a mental health number for people who are in crisis. So you can always call 000 if someone is in crisis. But if you were worried about someone and their safety, or if you yourself are worried about your own safety, that 1-800 number will connect you to your local mental health service, who will actually take you through some questions and really take you through some of the questions that might help you kind of reflect on the situation that you're going through at the moment. I guess what we want to say is that if you're starting to nudge up into the yellow and you're starting to feel like maybe you need to act now, then please check in with yourself, and please, seek out your GP support. I just really, I guess, want to summarize some of the things that we've talked about and talk a little bit more about the support services that are out there, particularly if people are watching this through to the end. But we'll put these numbers, Fiona, we can put all of this information onto the webpage as well, so people don't have to kind of get right to the end of the webinar. Yeah, great. So, and I'm aware that we haven't put the NALAG phone number on there. I put 66, but not the full number. I'm sorry about that. With most things, in terms of well-being and stress, the first point of call, we would always encourage people to talk to their friends, their family, and their network. And Are You OK Day and Beyond Blue and some of those resources have amazing information for peer support and family support. So it's really, it is really worthwhile looking at those at those websites if you yourself are supporting someone who might be feeling anxious or stressed. But always go to your peers, stay connected. That is probably one of the most powerful well-being tools that we have, is staying connected. Just, nerdy fact, we know that social isolation actually is as bad for your health as smoking is. And that's something that we often think that we that it's physical things that create that create stress or poor well-being, but actually social isolation is a huge part of the stress that we experience. Now, if you head to so the next step, going to your GP, so getting a mental health plan from your GP, if you've never done that before, what that is the GP will ask you some questions about how you're coping and how you're managing, and they'll usually give you a short survey to do. It's about 10 questions, and that question, little questionnaire gives you gives the GP a sense of where you are and how you're coping, and helps them to make a referral then to a psychologist, and then or a social worker. And that's usually covered by Medicare up to a point. So, and Fiona, I wonder, so New Access is also a local program that you can tap into, and it's like mental health coaching. And Fiona, do you want to talk a little bit about that just for a moment?
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. So you don't need a GP provision to go to that. You can just call them. So it's just looking at New Access online, searching for that online. It is a structured program, but it's individualised as far as I understand.
Yep.
I think there's 6 sessions that you get to access, and it's run here in Coffs Harbour and in our local health area, so that's quite broad in our stream. I think it's maybe poured up to Tweed or something like that. So there's quite a bit of accessibility to that program. There's also, obviously at the moment, they're doing things online and through telehealth and stuff as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So if you want a structured program and you want to see a psychologist or someone for some coaching, then your GP and New Access are the ways to do that. Now, some people really like the mental health coaching model. Myself, as someone who's a kind of active kind of thinker and a bit like Paul, quite pragmatic, then I like coaching. And I think the coaching style of things, it actually does provide a really useful way to kind of think about what's happening, what do I want to work on, what do I want to improve. So I would encourage you to kind of look at that if that's something that appeals to you. Helplines. So online, there are a number of helplines beyond Blue. There are the mental health line, which I've just provided to you, and Lifeline. And again, many of these are kind of crisis lines, and often they're often used by people in the middle of the night when they really feel at crisis. But actually, I guess I want to bust the stigma of that a little bit, that these helplines are also often used just by many people, regular people, all the time to kind of check in with another human being. So please do reach out to the helplines if you need support. Now, the NALAG, we offer 6 sessions of support counselling through a volunteer, and that grief support work is for any kind of loss. So we work with people who have experienced loss from bushfires through to the experience of a death, loss of job, loss of home, all kinds of losses. And I guess I wanted to get the word out about the work that we do at NALAG, because you can access that, and we'll provide the phone number as part of the resourcing that goes out to everyone. But it could be that you, as an employee, if you're watching this, might want to access, but it might be that you want your employees to, as an employer, you want to be able to provide this number to your employees to get some support for some of the losses or the experiences that they're going through. It's not EAP. It's not psychological therapy. It's really peer-to-peer support that it's like speaking to a regular person. And one of the things that people value very much is being able to just kind of connect with someone on that human to human level. Well, we've talked a lot about psychologists, counsellors and social workers as part of the mental health plans, but you can also just simply get the phone book out or get on the internet and look up your local counsellors and psychologists and self-refer. You don't need a GP referral if you're willing to kind of just self-refer to those health workers. Is there anything else that I can provide or that would be helpful there, Fiona, or anyone else that is online? Christina, do you feel like has that covered a good range of supports?
I think one of the things, Kerrie, is just to, like where you've got there about catching up with your peers and your networks and families or family members. I guess for a number of small businesses in our area and in regional towns, those people are in business with them sometimes, or so I guess just, is there any other more social way that you would recommend to do that rather than just through medical fields, or is that the best option, I guess, around that?
Yeah, look, the thing about peers is often it's about the social connection. So it may not be that you get the kind of I don't know, emotional coping or psychological support necessarily from peers, friends and families, but actually what you need at the moment is connection. So it might be at the moment, for example, they're, booking a time to go out or going on a walk with a few people, or it's really about reaching out to the people in your network that may, that you can interact with, so that you're not just kind of in your own little world, if that makes sense.
That makes good sense.
Yeah. So kind of reach out to your networks. Go for a bushwalk. Like, you don't even have to talk about what's going on. They don't even have to be another business owner, but have a walk. Get out, have a surf. Go to an event that is happening in your community, that you can at least have social connection and contact with people. Yeah. Anything else there, Fiona?
No, I think that's really good. Lots of good, really practical opportunities, but I think that self-assessment is a really good tool. So we'll make sure that we send that out with what we're sending out to people, and have this as part of when people pick up the recording, we'll make sure that that's available for them to download as well. So yeah.
Fab. And please do, I guess please do feel free to pick up the phone to NALAG if you want that kind of peer-to-peer support as well. We really have some great volunteers who are also small business owners who volunteer on the side as part of the work that they do in communities, and it's a really it can be a really helpful thing to do, just to have a supportive and confidential ear of someone who isn't in your family and friends and kind of business space as well.
And I guess that's probably a really interesting point, is that it's about understanding what a small business owner is going through, so that connection in that regards is a really good opportunity for people. So we will certainly make sure that the number is updated on the PowerPoint, so no problem.
Great. All right, well, I hope this has been helpful. It's the idea of this was to be a really kind of practical webinar that really encourages people to self-assess and to kind of think about where they're at, and then to provide some tools based on where people are at as well. So I hope it's been a helpful resource for people.
Thank you very much, Kerrie. We really greatly appreciate the time that you've given to us, and also these resources that have allowed small business owners to have a look and to do that self-check, and I guess to understand that there are different things that we think and feel at different times, but there's a lot of different types of support around as well. So thanks for making sure of the awareness of that, and ensuring that our small business owners feel supported in what they're doing.
Great. No worries.
Thank you, and we'll catch up again sometime.
Thank you.